of view. I fear that much has been said during the day, and in particular, for example, at the workshop I attended in the afternoon. So I have a duty to try and go beyond. And that is not easy, because when we're talking about EU-Korea relations, we may be obsessed, mesmerized with the short-term view, and the short-term view is, of course, what's happening on the side of North Korea, the repeated issues that come from North Korea. And then we tend to look at a much larger, much wider, much brighter future, which is that there should be a natural fit for relations between the Korean Peninsula in general and Europe for a number of reasons I'm going to try to stretch out. Yet, these relations are not always at the level that they should be, or even when they exist, the political consciousness for them is not necessarily completely there. Let me start, however, by stating that the issue of the FTA, what has happened over the past few years, the fact that Korea has been able to place the decisive push and make the necessary concessions for the FTA to happen with Europe, and what has been happening since the FTA is in place. Of course, it's easier for us Europeans to say that because with the economic climate in Europe, we are the first beneficiaries chronologically of the free trade agreement, and we have to presume that Korea will be ultimately a very strong beneficiary too, but in the first phase, the conjuncture has decided in that way. But that it shows that the two countries, the Korea as a country and Europe as a group of nations, could go beyond many obstacles and chart a way for the future and take decisive steps towards that future. There are, however, obstacles, and the obstacles I think we have to restate. Korea, whether north or south, has been hemmed in for 1.5 centuries in a region of big powers with big power management and with sphere of influence thinking, which has never completely disappeared from the region, tends to reappear. The Koreans call themselves a shrimp among whales, and now, of course, it's a very big shrimp. And some of the whales are getting smaller. But that is, of course, the Korean mentality. You could only compare it to the situation in Central Europe or the Balkan 60 years ago. And of course, we Europeans have a very strong experience of this sphere of influence and balancing and hedging and in diplomatic relations. But the thing is, the European Union is an experiment that has succeeded in superseding that era, in moving to a different era. Korea, south or north, in fact, I would venture to say, is partly stuck by the circumstances, by the environment in that era, and we have to take that into account. This is important because Europe is not significant today as a hard power in East Asia, whereas the US is, Japan is, China is, considerably. Russia was and could be again. We do not come equipped with the tools, so to speak, to move with the hard power issues in Northeast Asia, which creates for us the temptations to be otherwise creative or to try to go beyond this environment, but it's not always possible, and we have to be very careful when we do it, which creates for Koreans, North and South, the temptation to treat Europe as a useful complement, as something that is different from their usual environment. I heard in a previous session that the North Koreans, in fact, had friendship for Europe because what they received for Europe, I would say that is true, but one might add it's also a partner that's not strong enough to impose really conditions on Europe, on North Korea beyond the sanctions, and that therefore the North Koreans always think that it might prove to be an easier partner to deal with than the others. So friendship is probably tinged with the notion that you might get more from Europeans than from others. For South Koreans, for South Korea, even though South Korea has become a global power thanks to its multinational firms, thanks to the extended range it has in different fields, even though it wants to think global very clearly. That has been the motto of several succeeding presidents, and I think it will remain so with President Park when she comes in. But South Korea does not have the kind of footing in Europe that either China or Japan have. China has an army, so to speak, of Chinese immigrants, of contacts on the ground, and Japan has a long history of cultural exchange and MNCs, which are deeply entrenched. It has a history of relations with countries like the UK. It is more difficult for Korea, which therefore tends to deal with us either as a regional power with requests for itself or as a global economy power, something that goes in fact beyond the European Union, that's in the economic sphere. Witness the true engagement that Korea has been able to give to its G20 co-presidency, for example. And some of us, I remembered, were skeptical at the time because even the Koreans were not completely daring enough in their propositions. But now that we see what's happening after them, we regret, of course, the Korean presidency, co-presidency of the G20. So this is clearly a forward-looking country. The problem with Europeans is how to deal with it and how to deal with it realistically. Let me start by North Korea, since it's the problem of the day, and it's the problem of the decade perhaps, but it's certainly the problem of the day. It's the hardest problem in the world for diplomats. There are no rewards, only penalties for dealing with North Korea. And Americans know fully well they have to get their act together, they have to line up, they have to be fully unitary in the way they act. And this, with a small country, a small partner, what remains in theory a small problem, only regional if there wasn't the proliferation factor. It's even harder for Europe. And one problem I see is that we discuss policies, we discuss a range of policies. Currently, of course, it's going to be in between reinforced sanctions and acceding or agreeing to increased deterrence of the North, or on the contrary, further engagement. But the problem is not so much the choice between those two solutions. Almost every policy on North Korea has failed, whether it's sanctions or whether it's engagements. It's how and when you apply it. And that has often been a problem with European action. I personally still regret that at the time that we undertook recognition for most of us, most European countries recognized North Korea, even if it's true that not all are represented actually in Pyongyang. That was done as a kind of unilateral, voluntary gesture without some kind of deal. We had the illusion that if we gave more, we would get more, and that was probably an illusion. The DPRK currently is in a strange situation because I think it has reached its historic goals. It's a nuclear power, and it's getting to be a ballistic power, and it is on the way to reinstating the deterrent that it lost sometimes in the 70s. It is extremely important for the defense of the regime. The problem is they have no goal beyond that. They have no view of the future. They have no regional view apart continuing to balance. We now know that they are not dependent or completely hostage of the People's Republic of China, however deep the interdependence. They need a policy beyond achieving this goal. And that is going to create problems for them. We cannot hope to achieve our goals through a policy that's solely dealing with proliferation, solely dealing with the nuclear imperative, because unfortunately we now understand that the solution of this problem will come last, not first. I believe that the North Koreans are after a guarantee for not only the state, but the regime. We cannot give a guarantee for the regime, but we might give an effective guarantee to the state. That is important. It runs contrary to the goal of reunification, which is a stated goal for North and South, but that's the reality. I think Europeans, particularly those who are members of the Security Council, Russia, which is, I have heard, cited on the side of China, but Russia is never fully on the side of China. For example, Russia could have high hopes of direct relations through the Korean Peninsula with the South, gas, train, rail. These countries should serve as a kind of guarantor for a future status of North Korea. I don't think it matters so much if we look at the SixParty Talk. The SixParty Talk are the envelope that is invoked when things start up, but the solutions are not reached through the SixParty Talks so fast. They are just a sign that something is happening. So I, of course, would not be opposed. I would be delighted if Europe took part, but I don't think that would change the form of the SixParty Talk, which is purely circumstantial. I think the situation now requires more inventivity, more creativity to solve the North Korean problem. And as much as we dislike the regime, as we dislike particularly its human rights record, we now need to find novel solutions to get out of the trap that we're in. That, I think, is very important. On the side of relations with the ROK, I cannot disassociate it personally, apart, of course, from sectoral cooperation, which is hugely useful given the advanced technology and the advanced social technology that the ROK has in different areas. But I cannot separate it from the goal of regionalization and regional institutions. I think we have a duty, for example, as Europeans, to outline to our Korean friends and to others in East Asia over maritime issues, over issues of compromise on territorial issues, over issues involving history, for example. We have a duty to outline how we modestly, after much bloodshed, after many problems, have found solutions, how we can help to transfer them, how we can modestly hope that some of these experiences are useful. I think it is important in that sense that the EU, and not only the member states, show itself as an active partner that is pushing for regional institutions and region building. That is perhaps one of the biggest contributions that we can make at this point for the region. It would be very important to help foster in South Korea, which is now an advanced society, an advanced economy on the technological frontier, to begin fostering in Korea what I would call the pride of contributing to global norms. It strikes me that in several areas, South Korean industrialists and scientists do actually infinitely better than where their country is at in terms of international norms, whether you talk about environment or a number of similar issues. South Korea actually underplays its advanced status when it could be a model. That has very long been a Japanese, how should I say, not exactly a Japanese monopoly, but a Japanese niche in the region. And Korea is acquiring it, in fact, through its firms, through its technology, but it's not playing it fully at the level of international norms. That would be very useful. We are locked currently in a situation where only the EU and Japan probably keep pushing for these norms, which are not widely accepted, particularly by emerging economies. So I would plead for a new stage of development for EU-Korea relations beyond the FTA that makes Korea a promoter of global norms. This is, in fact, what they started to do within the G20 on financial issues, without doubt. So it's not as if they hadn't started on that road, but it could be pushed. And that, I think, would justify much attention on the part of Europeans. That is about what I want to say. I realize that there are missing grounds, missing parts in what I've said about the future of EU-Korea relations. Singularly, I would mention education and the promotion of exchanges, which are still not developed enough, and which would justify a very strong push. I think our youth, on the average, don't know Korea as well as they know some other Asian cultures, and that there should be a policy to encourage the developments in those areas. Thank you very much.